Hi, I'm Scott Yeager, Vice President of Sales for MFS Datanet. We've talked about the unique advantages of MFS Datanet, and what I want to do is quickly go over just some examples of cost issues, because the problem that we have with end users trying to compare our service to other approaches is that we're constantly being compared to the wrong thing. And what happens is that if we learn to communicate to the end user what it is they're really buying, and they compare us to the right solution that they would build on their own, they find that the cost difference between what we offer and what they could build on their own is so great that there really is not an issue with respect to cost. However, what happens is the end user compares us to the wrong thing that doesn't have the full functionality of our service, and as a result, we are put in a situation where we have to demonstrate to the customer the value of our service. Essentially, when you build your own network, no matter what you do, you have, whether it's private line or whatever, you have to decide on cost versus functionality trade-offs. So there's financial considerations and functionality considerations, and you have to weigh those two things, and one of the main things is a star versus a mesh topology. Now, if you use a star topology, you really don't get any of what you might call LAN-to-LAN-like functionality, because you don't have a standard interface that LANs provide, you don't have any-to-any connectivity because everything's homed into a major site, and if you lose that main site, nobody can talk. If you go out and build your own network using a full mesh, then you do get LAN-like functionality to some degree. You do get you don't get a standard LAN interface, but you do get any-to-any connectivity, because every site has a circuit to every other site, or a private virtual circuit if you've got something like frame transport. And if you lose a site, all other sites can still talk. But the MFS Datanet family of services, especially the LAN, transparent LAN services, comes with full LAN-like functionality. And that means you get a standard interface, physical interface that you're used to, that's a LAN interface. You get any-to-any connectivity, and if you lose a site, all other sites still communicate. When you look at that from a cost perspective, and you build a network on private T1s versus buying an HLI service at 1.5 megabits, what you find out that is you end up with an apples to oranges comparison that's pretty dramatic. And essentially, you can buy a service from MFS Datanet that runs at 1.5 megabits that has LAN-like functionality between 4 cities for just a little bit more than you could build a star T1 backbone. And if you tried to build a full mesh T1 backbone, it becomes so expensive that you can't normally afford it. So that you need to be compared between the $45,000, which is the full LAN-like functionality, and the lower cost star T1, which is $25,000, as opposed to letting someone say, well, your $29,000 LAN-like deal costs more than my star of T1s at $25,000. Because if you let the customer make that comparison, then they have totally devalued everything that we bring to the table. The same thing holds true, obviously, at DS3 speeds of 45 megabits, except it becomes ridiculous. No one builds full mesh DS3 backbones because they cost too much. People will not spend $275,000, and that assumes a 40% discount off Terra prices to interconnect 4 cities. And so what they do is they build maybe a star at $85,000 if they're lucky, and then with us they could have bought a LAN-like backbone for $65,000 a month. So in that instance, our LAN-like backbone has more functionality for less money than building a star of DS3s. When you talk about frame relay, it becomes a little bit more difficult, and since we offer a frame transport service, you have to make sure that you position it properly. Frame relay is a term that connotates several things, and it connotates a shared T1 backbone, and it connotates some latency things, and it went to market promising full mesh-to-mesh connectivity, and it promised to displace the need for building a private T1 backbone, displace the need for multiple local loops. And what happened was that the customer would go out and look at building a frame relay network, and then they would look at the cost real quick, see they can't build a full mesh one, and then they would end up settling for something a little bit less. And so that's where the old bait and switch comes in. They think they're buying a Ferrari and they end up with a Model T. And so, or pre-Model T, as this picture indicates. So what you end up with is frame relay versus the HLI. You have a star, typically, that you're being compared to with the standard transparent LAN service that functions with any-to-any connectivity the way that LANs work, which you can only be accomplished with full mesh. And so the public frame relay services typically do not end up being configured to give the functionality that we give with our standard HLI transparent LAN service. So what it boils down to is there's really no reason that the customer has to settle for less. For just a little bit more money, they can get a whole lot more functionality out of the HLI transparent LAN service than if they build a frame relay network. And obviously, there's other problems with frame relay that the industry is familiar with, where you choke at T1 speeds. If 20 sites want to burst back at 256 kilobits to one main site, you exceed 1.5 megabits, so you have to put in more bandwidth on that main star site, and that is pretty much eliminated that problem with using the HLI family of transparent LAN services. So when you get into a comparison, what you need to do is make sure that you compare the HLI family of LAN interconnect services properly to building a private lease line backbone or frame transport service. And then if you have a customer that says, no, I really want frame relay, then we can sell an apples to apples comparison. We can drive our costs down, but we reduced our functionality. And so the customer sees the value of the higher performing service and the more robust service, sees the value of the LAN interface and the LAN-like functionality, but if they're not willing to place enough value on it to pay more money for it, then we have another product and service that lets us back off the functionality and back off the cost and be competitive in that environment as well. There really are no reasons why we shouldn't be able to get business no matter what customer requirements you run into or what technology they want to choose. Thank you.